Again, good day, everyone. Terrence Walker of Consulting Partners. So happy that you can actually hear me. That said, we're moving towards continuing in our consolidation series. Today, we'll speak more specifically to the Task Manager module of FCCS. In that name, the webcast will be based on, again, I can manage my closed task in FCCS without actually launching FCCS for consolidations. Now that we confirmed that you guys can actually hear the audio component, can you guys positively affirm that you can actually see the shared content of the webcast? Once we get positive affirmation, I will begin. A bit tardy, but I'll begin our webcast. Again, I apologize for the audio difficulties. Thank you very much. You can see the screen, so we will get started. First we'll start with a bit of a pass down of information about our company. Who is interRel Consulting Partners? We are very excited to have been awarded the Oracle Cloud Excellence Implementer. We're also a 4-time winner of Oracle's BI and EPM Partner of the Year. Very excited to have 6 Oracle ACE directors and ACEs on staff, and even more excited from a cloud implementation perspective. Very excited to have been the first implementer in a number of cloud-based Oracle platforms, including S-Based Cloud, Enterprise Planning and Budgeting Cloud Service, and lastly, Financial Consolidations and Cloud Service. With that, we'll jump right into today's webcast. We'll first speak to what is this freaking thing called the cloud. Cloud is no more than a means of being able to pass on responsibility for housing, storing, and maintaining physical servers, and that our proud friends at Oracle have massive data centers throughout the world that they house these types of apparatus to be able to maintain the agile physical architecture for deploying our cloud-based application initiatives. The cloud-based applications are very well built for deploying or accessing the cloud-based functionality via mobile platforms, with also an ability to be able to access cloud-based initiatives via the web as well as over email or what have you. Some benefits of implementing cloud. Most definitely one of the greatest benefits or wins in the pivot of the transition to the cloud would be a reduced cost model for an information technology shop, as well as being able to leverage the actual software costs or lower those software costs, given that we are for implementations relative to the consolidation cloud, where these would be software as a solution, which are primarily subscription-based implementations, versus having to have the heavy burden of the cost of managing, maintaining server hardware and the corresponding responsibility that's included with managing upgrades or what have you of software platforms on premise. Some additional speak to cloud benefits. Again, the cloud-based platforms also include very intuitive user interfaces, which by definition will probably going to lead to greater experiences from a training perspective, as well as reducing training costs. As I mentioned earlier, the mere advent or having the necessity to perform upgrades or install patches becomes more of a ladder than a go-forward platform. And again, as we mentioned earlier, the literal Oracle EPM Cloud offerings, for the most part, are subscription-based, while there are some that are more or less based on application sizing or the volume of size that would be required to deploy a specific cloud application. From a cloud terminology perspective, there are 2 basic tenets or acronyms, and we'll use quite a few, that are prevalent in the space. The first is software as a service, or SaaS. Again, this is highly leveraged in software licensing for delivery of the actual product itself. Also, when we're talking about trying to simulate what types of products in the Oracle EPM space are SaaS products, example might be the Account Reconciliation Cloud or Financial Consolidation and Close Cloud. Those are examples of a software as a service where there's a specific subscription cost or value that's assigned with having access to said platforms. Conversely, there's also a platform as a service, a PaaS. And the PaaS is no more than a platform which allows customers to develop, run, and manage those complex build without having to manage those complexities of building and maintaining said applications. And the most prevalent example of a platform as a service application that I'm intimately aware of is the Oracle Analytics Cloud, or OAK. In that OAC is a platform as a service application that is not simply as based in the cloud, but it also offers quite a bit of additional functionality from a dashboarding or BI reporting perspective, which again, given the volume of content and the sheer value of the functionality in that specific software service offering, lends to great, from a definition perspective, while the platform as a service is much more indicative of what it is versus a software service. Now we're talking about Task Manager. What does it come with, or what specifically is it? Now, for some who have experienced on-prem implementations of FCM or the Financial Close Manager, Task Manager is no more than the transitioned on-prem functionality to the cloud, which was initially referred to as Close Manager, but has more recently been rebranded as Task Manager and is no more than a task management system. This particular platform, at some point in the near term, will be deployed across all of the Oracle EPM applications, but today it sits within the Consolidation Cloud product set. It's able to integrate with a number of Oracle ERPs from a versioning perspective, as well as non-Oracle products. And more importantly, it has an opportunity to be able to interface with a number of EPM Cloud offerings from Oracle as well. It's also available as a standalone solution, that being Oracle Task Management. And in the coming moments, you'll recognize some of the value and how this particular type of service can be very beneficial in management of tasks and a corresponding monthly task management schedule. And that we're talking about the core components of the application. It's highly template-based, and we define templates to define what the corresponding repeatable tasks are to be. We then spawn those templates into becoming schedules, and the schedules are no more than a pure definition from on a year time basis of activities that are to occur. And they may even be delineated down to a regional level, in that there may be differing task definitions based on a region within a corresponding company or more macro enterprise. Within that actual schedule definition, we have, as we mentioned, the ability to be able to interface with other ERP or EPM solutions. This is no more than an example of our ability to be able to review certain data forms within the Consolidation Cloud application to verify that a specific task has been completed. And within this application, we have the ability from a literal workflow perspective to assign a specific person to perform said task to ensure that that task is completed. And then lastly, within the application, we can actively view the status of said task within the application, because at its literal core, beyond being simply a task management solution, it is no more than, at its literal core, a communication solution, a communication tool, in furthering or bettering communications across what the actual status is on a task management basis within the financial period. Next, we'll speak to, do I really need this dang task manager thing? I already have a task management system, but can it ever be superseded by anything that Oracle offers? Well, the answer is probably yes, because in most accounting and finance shops, their task management solution is literally Microsoft Excel. There is probably some form of a closed schedule that's in Excel that has a range of tasks per day, but there is limited to no active communication as far as whether a task has been started, completed, or where we actually stand in the completion of said task, because our reality is, in a number of cases, tasks, for whatever reason, there may be a reason that the task may not be completed per schedule, and given that specific reality, the order based on dependent tasks and then being completed is directly impacted. That's what solutions like Task Manager address. Active communication, making certain that any dependent relationships from a task perspective are actively communicated so that the actual realization of where we truly stand within the close is actively or avidly recognized throughout the actual financial period. Now we're talking about closed tasks again. Again, this particular model within Excel might be fairly lengthy. There are some differing probably opinions relative to the level of accuracy of the actual content within this type of model, as well as even determining whether the actual task assignments are actually true. To that end, we're talking about the communication of said task, the ability to be able to accurately track the status of a task being completed. In most cases, is limited to either a verbal communication or some form of email communication, and that the hope is that the person is charged with performing a task actually completes that task, and there is a means of communicating that to the schedule owner. But void of that verbal or that email form of communication, the most likely reality is there is no means of being able to track any bottlenecks because of limited to no communication across the schedule owner or the creator or the actual persons responsible for performing those tasks. Now, a bit of additional information relative to the actual tasks themselves. The reality that we've also realized, having worked in a world that uses Excel as our basis, there are a number of times we're talking about tasks and the actual communication of those tasks. We've actually had some situations where we had a closed schedule that included a task assignment, and the person had no clue that they're responsible for actually performing that specific task. Or there was a different specific modicum where the person may have been charged with performing the task. They just had no idea that there was an actual expectation the task be delivered by a specific date. So from an actual delivery perspective and an active communication perspective, Excel, while it's grand in doing certain things, there are some limiting factors that might make Excel less than operative when it comes to aligning that as the closed or task management solution itself. So next we'll speak to how in the dang world can Task Manager make my messy mess less messy. Let's speak to that. Now again, as we mentioned, Task Manager is a submodule of the Financial Consolidation and Close Cloud. It is no more than a series of templates that have been spawned into schedules. Again, those schedules are no more than an ordered definition of tasks with task assignments and durations. The application, as we mentioned earlier, has the wherewithal to communicate with differing external applications, whether it be on the ERP level and or on the EPM level as well. When we're talking about accessing the actual solution within FCCS, within the actual application card around the second row, there's actually functionality or a card that actually takes us to the Task Manager functionality itself. Now again, in most EPM solutions, be it on-prem or in the cloud, there are a number of ways of performing the same action. To that end, we also have a different fashion for accessing the Task Manager via the Navigator or navigation option, the top left, or for some people, the hamburger menu. Once we actually access the hamburger menu or the Navigator, we see different subsets of content, and that content is based on my provisioning or the specific role that has been assigned to me as a user. On the left, we see an active listing of connections, and again, these connections are our basic definitions for how Task Manager talks to other applications. In this particular example, we'll see that the Task Manager is connected or configured to connect to an ARCS application, as well as a Consolidations application being FCCS. Also within navigation, we will see different options for access within my specific user role definition. And within the actual application tier, just as we saw on the application card, we also have a means of accessing Task Manager from the Navigator menu as well. Now, as we mentioned, the core definition of the content of Task Manager is a task template-based solution, in that these are no more than repeatable tasks or processes that are defined by an administrator. So as far as making a simulation, we would basically take the content of our Excel document, repurpose, reformat that, and integrate that into task management on a template basis, and then deploy that template on a calendar basis for defining a corresponding schedule to move forward for our user community to be able to leverage or attest to having completed a specific task. Now, we talk about the actual completion of templates or the creation of templates in the application. We're actually going to go fairly deep to talk through what that looks like, because we want to make sure you have a good realization of what implementing Task Manager really means. From a little creation perspective, there's an option, as we mentioned here. There's a menu option to create a new template. And again, that new template definition is our means of defining the actual core properties of that template, where we come back after the fact and we import the corresponding template task. We've also got a means from our menu options of editing said specific template, and that if there's a need to amend the actual template properties, as I mentioned, we can amend those properties, be it by defining some form of instruction, defining some form, or reviewing embedded templates. In that, in the latter releases of Task Manager, there is also an ability to be able to create templates that are simply used for embedding So those specific templates would not be deployable as a schedule. They're simply used as a framework for deploying or creating a specific schedule. So really good functionality from an R&D perspective from our friends at Oracle. So again, from an edit perspective, we're simply editing the actual template's properties. Then we segue to speaking to having the ability to be able to delete a template. Again, the little admonishment here is be very certain when you elect to delete a template, because once it's gone, it is gone. Also in our ribbon for corresponding functions, we have the ability also to import task data. And that for all intents and purposes, the most common premise for updating Task Manager functionality is via Excel, where we can actually create a comma delimiter or a delimited file for importing back into our application. But from a practicality perspective, again, we're talking about that. Again, we can go out and search or find that from a file-based perspective. But from a practicality perspective, in most cases, as we're defining a starting point, most cases we're going to find that we're going to probably end up creating certain tasks within the actual module itself and export that to a file. Now, again, the means of exporting is fairly straightforward in that we elect to access the export task functionality, and that specific export creates a comma delimited file that we can access in Excel. A bit of additional content relative to the task export. The task export is a holistic or complete export of the tasks that are included in a specific template. The corresponding task properties are included in that specific export. Whether it will be the task ID, the name, the description, and or any form of prioritization from a priority definition, as well as the actual starting date or the starting date definitions from a time perspective as well. One point of reference here, given that templates are just that, the actual start date definitions are business day centric. Conversely, when we deploy a template to become a schedule, those dates are much more in line with actual calendar days for that specific period that we would elected to deploy said template to, which we'll speak to in a moment as well. We'll also speak some additional or the last few bits of functionality on our ribbon for the actual creation of a template is the validate option. Now, there are two forms of validation within Task Manager. We can manually validate a template or a schedule by accessing the actions menu for validate. But by definition, when we elect to deploy or create a schedule from a template, by definition, the validate process automatically runs. In that, the validate runs through to make sure that there is a uniqueness in task name or task ID. It also makes a cycle through the actual file to make sure that there are no violations from a dependent relationship perspective for the actual template's content. Once we confirm that the actual template is valid, we then have the means to be able to create a schedule from that template. And again, that specific definition is accomplished through running through a wizard, which is very, very well spelled out and amazingly intuitive, in that we define certain criteria for going in to deploy that specific template to becoming a schedule. And on the right, just as we mentioned on the y-axis, there are different actions that can be performed, whether it be editing, deleting, importing, or exporting. On a task template basis, there's also an actions menu, the three dots or the ellipses, that brings up that exact same functionality on a line item basis as well. So again, there's a commonality of functionality across the different extremes, more or less at a macro basis at the actual row header above, on an individual schedule basis as far as that line items actions menu as well. Now, we talk to template tasks. There are different views that we speak to when we talk about how do we actually deploy a task template. In this particular view, we actually see a task template that is compressed at the parent task level. And we can confirm that we're looking at parent task types based on our task type column on the far right. Now, how do we accomplish this task type definition to group a low-level task into a parent task? That's actually accomplished within the actual task file itself, in that we have the wherewithal to define the task type for each of our tasks. We can also define from a lower-level task perspective where those basic tasks or those integration tasks or event monitoring tasks, what have you, where they should be reflected from a grouping perspective. So our compressed view of the actual task in that template were accomplished by defining specific tasks as parent tasks for grouping purposes from a reflection perspective. Now, when we actually look at that actual task, template within the actual web version. We can see that we've actually expanded that today. Let's see those lower level tasks that roll up on a business day basis, given that this is a template. Then conversely, as we elect to go in and deploy said template as a schedule, we go in and define the corresponding naming convention. We assign a year period definition as well as defining day 0. When should the first day of this particular schedule be active or defined based on? We also have the ability to be able to select an organization unit and a corresponding date map. Again, transitions from being business day centric on the left. To the right, we see an actual active definition based on our day 0 date for the calendar days for that specific definition. One thing to make note as well, when we look at the actual wizard, we also see that there is an actual holiday, New Year's Day, and there are no associated tasks that have been assigned on that date. Now, the reality is there may be a number of litany of tasks that are assigned for day 1, but because we're looking to define or associate holidays within our closed schedule, that assures us that we won't have any tasks that are defined on scheduled holidays, so that we won't have any expectation of delivery when employees or workforce is away or out. After we go through and have our review of our actual content before deploying the actual schedule, we can then review the actual confirmation window, which speaks to the actual status of the actual deployment of said schedule and the corresponding content from a volume perspective of the number of tasks that are included in that specific schedule. Now, more speak about the mere advent of holiday rules. Holiday rules, again, are not necessarily system defined. They are admin-centric, where we'd assign a holiday rule to an organizational unit. An organizational unit is no more than a definition of tasks that are defined on a regional or what have you, or entity basis in that. There may be a differing schedule for a closed task based on a regional definition for the U.S. or EMEA. And we have the wherewithal to create differing definitions for that entity relationship or group relationship within Task Manager, as well as being able to assign differing holiday rule definitions for those specific organizational units. Now, how do we do this? We have the means of importing from a file a specific holiday groupings of content into the application. This is an example of said listing of holidays that we can import to the application. And again, once we import these rules into Task Manager and we associate the organizational unit to the schedule, then that specifically is where we have our definition for what specific days, based on our workday calendar or workday definitions, when specific scheduled tasks should not be defined based on our task definitions for when tasks should start. Again, just as we saw from the deployment view or confirmation view for our schedules, we also have that same confirmation view for importing holiday rules into our organization units as well. So again, this is our means of being able to prevent any scheduled tasks from being defined on a date that has been defined as a corporate holiday. Now, once we've created an actual schedule, and again, we've taken a template, we've gone through our creation and import wizard for creating a schedule, we've actually created a said schedule, we've actually included specific holiday rules in that schedule. Now, within that schedule definition as well, there are actually active status tracking abilities within Task Manager, and that there are 4 specifically that we'll speak of. The first is a pending status, which is the initial status once a schedule is created. Then the following 3 are more or less true to the actual life cycle of that corresponding task schedule. And that once we elect to make a schedule open, then the communication channel, then the ability for our users to go in and can perform those tasks is made available. We can also close the schedule out. And again, for all intents and purposes, that doesn't stop the wheel from turning. It just prevents the additional update of that schedule for adding new tasks or what have you. But if there's a need to go back and have an administrator or the schedule owner go in and reopen that specific schedule, that specifically can be done as well. And lastly, we've got an opportunity to be able to lock a specific schedule, which again prevents subsequent update to that specific schedule. But again, if there's a necessity to go in and reopen that, the task or better, the schedule owner or the administrator has the wherewithal to go in and reopen that locked schedule also. Some additional actions that we speak to when we're talking about schedules. Within a schedule, we have an opportunity to be able to reassign a user to a schedule, meaning that there may be a definition for a user to perform an action, but that specific action may need to be redirected to a different user. We have the ability here to be able to reassign specific tasks to a different user. We also have a monicum of authorizing tasks. Now, this is a callback to our ability to be able to connect or to interface with differing applications. Maybe one added or active example might be we have a specific task that speaks to closing the Oracle EBS General Ledger. From that perspective, we have functionality within the application that ensures that the person who is charged or assigned the role of performing said task, they actually have access or they're authorized to access the system. This particular functionality sends a communication out to that specific user to confirm they have access so that we can move forward in completion and the completion of creating this particular schedule to move forward to have those specific tasks in that specific ilk completed. We've also, as we mentioned earlier, have a means of validating a specific schedule, and that, as we mentioned earlier, for a template, when we create a schedule from a template, it automatically happens on schedule creation. We've also got a means within the schedule definition of validating schedule content as well to make certain that the actual content of that specific schedule is true. And then lastly, we have the means of generating a report binder, which is really, really good functionality that's within the actual tool itself that performs or produces some form of reporting based on content for a specific schedule or schedules to see the actual content and or the status of specific content within that specific schedule on a task basis. Now we're talking about the creation of templates and the deployment of schedules. How do users actually have fun within Task Manager? Well, let me tell you. Within the actual Task Manager functionality within Financial Consolidation Cloud, in the left, there's an announcements pane that, again, is based on security or access. But again, for those actual implementations that include Task Manager, you'll see some notifications of open tasks, late tasks, or what have you. A user can select on the open option to see a defined work list of specific tasks that have been assigned to that specific user. And again, this is all based on that user's access and corresponding tasks that have been assigned to that user as either a assignee or as an approver. Now that said, when the user actually goes in to view that specific content on a schedule or template basis, that content is visible in a couple of different fashions. The first fashion that we speak to is the list view fashion, in that it's a listing of all the corresponding content in the actual schedule itself. So again, we look at the actual content in a list view basis. We see the corresponding schedules task on the far left. We then correspond to the actual status of the corresponding task in the second column, and the corresponding following workflow definitions from a start end date perspective. We see the corresponding task type and the workflow definitions for the assigner and or the approver. Now within that specific view, we also have some other additional views. Again, the most commonly viewed is probably going to be the list view, but then there are some others that would like to see a more chronological view. Again, we can actually pivot the schedule view to be more Gantt-centric in that we can actually see the corresponding durations for said tasks, and we also, via the lines that are related or connected across those tasks, independent relationships for those tasks in the application or the application schedules as well. Then we also have a grouping view where we can actually group corresponding scheduled content based on the assignee, so we can actually see the number of tasks in the schedule assigned to a corresponding user, or we can elect to group that by organizational unit if we have multiple organizational units with actual task assignments within that specific schedule or the schedules that we're deploying. Now, as far as task performance, again, as a user, when I go in and access the actual work list or the specific tasks that are assigned to me on a user basis, I can actually deploy or access corresponding actions based on the definitions within that corresponding task. In this particular example, this is the actual task that has a direct link or connection into Consolidation Cloud. In this example, the user is tasked with going into FCCS to confirm that the exchange rates for this particular period have been correctly submitted into the application. Once that user has positively affirmed or confirmed that that is correct, that user can then go in and submit that specific task as being correct and true. If necessary, the user can then also maybe add some form of commentary to say, yes, I've gone through. And even from a little confirmation perspective, we can configure certain tasks to have questions to make certain that the user is going in and affirming that they've actually gone and confirm that level of detail as well, based on any controls that might be necessary in deploying corresponding tasks. Again, once the user, based on the workflow definitions, elects to submit a task, there is a wizard or window that pops up that basically says that you as a submitter, once you elect to submit this task, you will no longer have the ability to change or see this task again. So again, once the actual user confirms that, the actual status of the task changes to being completed by the assignee, and it then transitions to the actual approver. Again, these workflow definitions are configured within the actual templates. They can also be amended once we deploy that template to becoming a schedule. So literally the ball transitions from Carrie's court to Casey's court to go in to approve the work that Carrie completed. So how does actually Casey do that? Now here's the exact same view of the exact same task that Carrie saw as a submission task option, where since Casey has been defined as the actual approver, his actual options are different now. So Casey can go in and approve or reject based on his visibility of the actual data form, which include those currency rates or exchange rates. So on this basis, if necessary, he could reject and include some form of commentary, and then Carrie will go back in to make updates and resubmit, and we go through the workflow cycle again. So for all intents and purposes, the expectation is that Casey would approve this particular task. We'll see that literally from a literal list view perspective in our scheduled task definition. The review currency rates actual task would transition from being in progress to being completed, and that the next task, load admin data, would transition from being in progress to being in progress to having been started, because there is a direct relationship between task 15 and task 20. And that relationship is based on a finish to start relationship. So again, from a task performance perspective, we want to show you a different iteration of how we actually interact with other EPM applications. In this example, we have an actual task that's defined as performing high-risk reconciliations. When we actually go in to access that specific task, it actually opens up a window in ARCS, or Reconciliation Cloud, that actually shows a number of high-risk reconciliations. In this particular example, we're going to perform the reconciliation of the prepaid expenses account profile, or reconciliation definition. That said, as a user, this particular reconciliation actually doesn't have a single user assigned to it. It actually has a team assigned to it. So any user, based on provisioning or team definitions, can go in and claim or raise their hand and say, yes, I am going to complete this reconciliation. So once the user elects to claim this reconciliation, given that this particular reconciliation is an account analysis type, we're seeing that we're comparing the ending balance content from our source system to actual transactional definitions in our explanation, and there are around 49 of those. So the user in this particular case has the ability to be able to import data on a transactional basis into ARCS as a means of reconciling this particular account or profile definition. But in this particular example, there is actually an unexplained difference that the reconciler has to work through. That said, the actual reconciler then will go in and make the appropriate adjustments in ARCS so that the unexplained difference would have a valuation of 0. Once that particular reconciler is completed, they will go in and submit that specific task. Once they submit that task, there's then again that pop-up window that we saw in FCCS to confirm that that specific task won't be visible again, and it will move forward in workflow. We then transition to the actual view of the definition of the actual reconciliation based on ARCS. But in this particular example, this particular workflow definition doesn't include an approver along with the preparer. It actually has a rule defined for this particular reconciliation that probably says that once a submitter goes in and reconciles that specific reconciliation, if the unexplained difference is either 0 or within an acceptable threshold, we have a rule that says that this particular reconciliation can automatically be approved. That's what we're seeing here, where the specific actual reconciliation has been submitted and it has been closed. So when we go back to our actual reconciliation view within ARCS, we'll see that that particular reconciliation now, as opposed to having a status of being with preparer, it is now closed because the reconciler has performed the appropriate actions. And due to our rule definition, it executed and actually closed that reconciliation without having to have some form of an approval. Now, we talked about that reconciliation. For those who were paying attention, there was a reference to claiming that specific reconciliation. So how do you claim a reconciliation, and what is this advent of a team and claiming a reconciliation, Terrence? Well, within the actual tool itself, Within the Tools card, there is Access Control where we define security within the Task Manager application. So once we elect to access the Access Control module, there is a functionality for managing teams. So from a team management perspective, I'm going in and creating a new team. I basically go in and define a corresponding team name. And from a roles definition perspective, we're talking about there are specific levels of roles that are assigned within Task Manager. There's an administrative role group, there's a power user group, there's a user group, and there's a viewer group. As I'm going in to create the corresponding teams, and I elect to determine or define a specific user group level, when I elect to enable the power user group, the only users that I'll see when I'm electing to select certain users within that group will be those users who have the power user role assigned to them. Conversely, if I want to include a user with a viewer role, I could not add that specific user to this team because they don't have the appropriate role definitions. So once I elect the corresponding users who should be part of that specific team and select those users are then commissioned being part of this team. So from a assimilation perspective, in that reconciliation, if we assign the TMAP team to a task, any user within this particular team can go in and claim a task to perform it, which means that we can share the responsibility for performing tasks as opposed to this being specifically defined for a specific user. But to that end, we can also define a primary user who is the person who would be most commonly expected to accept that specific task or perform that specific role, or what have you. That person can be defined as a primary user, but any person within that team has the wherewithal to go in and to claim that specific task, or from an ARCS perspective, claim that reconciliation to perform it through completion. Also, we're talking about active communication within an application. There is a need at times to define some form of an alert. An alert is no more than a means of speaking or declaratively speaking to an issue or concern. Within Task Manager, when we're going through and performing specific actions, whether it be to review content or in this particular case, review forecast data, this is an example where the actual user noticed that the actual desktop computer's account has actual data but does not have any forecasted values for that particular account combination based on our point of view. From that perspective, that user can elect based on their task assignment to go in and to create an alert. When they're creating that alert, there's an alert wizard to define a naming convention, a type, priority, what have you, and also they can assign a person who's assigned to help them address that concern. From this perspective, we actually have a alert that was created to verify or signify that there's missing data for our forecast. We actually define a type and we've actually assigned a priority. And the actual creator of this alert also offers some form of declarative description for what the actual issue is. And they're simply asking that Casey go in and submit the forecast data for this particular account combination. Also went in and assigned Casey as the assignee and carry the approval once Casey goes in and impacts data within the Consolidation Cloud application. Once that specific alert is created, this particular alert is part of the repository of activities for this corresponding task. What happens then is once we've actually created the alert, from a literal workflow perspective, in Casey's work list for open activities that he's charged with performing, he'll then get a notification that there is a task that he needs to perform, and he'll have specific directions for what's needed based on the creation's creator, or the alert creator, speaking to the need to be able to create or assign forecast data for desktops and computers. Once Casey's gone in and performed that corresponding action in the Consolidation Cloud, he can go in and submit that specific alert or submit that alert on his side to confirm that he's performed that task, and then he can move forward. Also, on a workflow basis, Kira can go in and confirm that he actually reviewed that content in Consolidation Cloud, and they can actually move forward in closing that task out in the actual application as well. Now we're talking about task workflow. This is a fairly robust view of what user assignments can be on a task basis. In that, we've got to be able to assign a user as the assignee, or we can even offer a backup assignee. We can also define a task duration across days or a specific hourly range within a specific date. We can also define a minimum duration for how the baseline for how long a task should take, as well as electing to allow an early start, so that if a task has a specific start and end definition, this would allow the assignee to be able to start that specific task prior to the defined definition for when that specific task can be started. And then from a little continual workflow definition, we can also define an approver and or a backup approver if necessary. We can also assign from a little workflow perspective a team as opposed to a simple user or single user for both the assignee and the approver roles. As far as the task predecessors, this is also functionality that we would define within the actual template, and if necessary, we could amend this within the actual schedule. And for all intents and purposes, there are 4 specific types of predecessor relationships or conditions that we can define within the actual scheduled task definition. The most commonly used is finish to start, where we'll have a task finished before the subsequent task or the subsequent related task can start. We could even have a finish error to start or finish error to finish, which basically says that the previous task must finish even if it's finished in error before the next task can start, or it'll be automatically noted as being finished. And then the last condition that is available as well is finish to finish. That requires that the previous task be completed before the other task can be marked as complete as well on a predecessor relationship basis. Now, in the previous exercise, we spoke to the definition of an alert. We also spoke earlier from a schedule creation perspective as far as actions options, the ability to be able to reassign task assignments. This is the actual view within the actual actions options for a specific task, in that a user, for whatever reason, can elect to request that a task be reassigned. There again is no assurance that that specific task will be assigned, but the assignee can request it. And again, there is a reassignment wizard that speaks to a request for assigning that particular task to a different user, as well as within that specific wizard offering a justification for it. Now again, as that user goes in and searches for a user to assign it to, in this particular case, they're going to assign it to Casey Brown. They can then go in and define the reassignment basis. Now, there are 2 options for defining the reassignment basis. They can elect to just specifically reassign this particular task in this particular period, or they can elect to reassign this task and all future tasks of this particular template to this new user. But in this particular case, this particular user elected to just reassign the task for this particular period. Now, once that specific request has been selected to be okay, then that specific request goes into the service administrator or the schedule creator. That specific schedule creator has the ability to go in to perform some form of workflow to approve or reject it based on the justification. Once that specific approver goes in to review the actual reassignment request, once that specific request has been approved, then the new assignee, based on the reassignment definition, now has that task as part of that specific person's work list or tasks that are to be performed. Now, as you wrap up, there's some additional functionality I'll make sure we speak to as far as how robust this application is. On an integration basis, there are a number of different opportunities that we spoke to earlier as far as how this particular tool integrates with other applications. For all intents and purposes, there are 3 basic definitions for integrations. There are end-user integrations, there are process automation integrations where we actually talk to other systems, and there are also event monitoring integrations that occur. Some examples we've noted, going out and confirming on an event schedule-based or activity-based that the general approval event has actually occurred within EBS. Once that specific action occurs in EBS or activity occurs, then a litany of subsequent processes can actually run. So again, once we've configured our connectivity to other applications, be it in the ERP or the EPM space, this particular tool is really, really powerful in performing a number of activities, leveraging out-of-the-box functionality, which we'll speak to. From an EPM Cloud perspective, Task Manager again interacts with a number of cloud-based applications, including ARCS or Reconciliation Cloud, Enterprise Planning and Budgeting Cloud or EPBCS. It also interacts with Consolidations Cloud and Tax Reporting Cloud, as well as Profitability and Cost Management Cloud, or PCMCS. For each of these particular applications, there are a wide variety of pre-built integrations. We actually have some examples on the right for specific actions that the task manager application can actually kick off from within its actual functionality as well. And again, this is all based on connectivity and define the corresponding parameters to run specific tasks or integrations across these EPM applications. But it doesn't just stop there. Task Manager also interacts actively with the Fusion Cloud or the ERP Cloud from Oracle, and that within a number of the modules or sub-modules within the Fusion Cloud, it actually has, again, a number of people integrations that would normally be run manually. We can actually, via our connection, we can actually kick those actual tasks off from within the Task Manager functionality as well. It also works in a hybrid fashion, and it also has an ability to be able to interact on an integration basis with on-premise applications. And those on-premise applications are both ERP and EPM centric, and that we can kick off actual activities or tasks within HFM or Hyperion Financial Management, or even Oracle's e-business suite within each of its sub-ledgers or general ledger. Also, it works within the EPM suite of products for the Calculation Manager, Financial Reporting, and Hyperion Planning, as well as the ETL tool, FDM or FDME, for kicking off different integrations for integrating content into target applications. And again, this can all be kicked off based on pre-built integrations within the actual application, provided that we have the corresponding access to those applications to actually run those specific actions. Now, from a reporting perspective, there are a number of different options that we have within the application. One of the specific areas that is most highly regarded is the ability to be able to reference dashboards, and that within the actual application, there is a dashboard card that gives us access to different visual means or mediums. In this particular view, we're actually seeing the task overview dashboard that is no more than a listing, in this particular case, of all the tasks that are available for the January 2017 period for all of our schedules. Literally, the user can go in and select on a corresponding dashboard grid definition, whether it be the pie chart on the left or the bars on the right. And once they make an election or selection, they can actually see the corresponding tasks that are part of Task Manager. They can actually deploy or open those tasks from this dashboard view as well. So if I'm a user and I want to open a dashboard because it's assigned to me, from my dashboard view, I can actually access an application dashboard to see that content within Task Manager. And you also note at the top, given that I may have a specific task assigned to me, given that I'm accessing this from the dashboard or the dashboard view, I can actually go through and perform the Task Manager properties or definitions based on the specific task workflow definitions also. Now, also from a dashboarding perspective, as we mentioned, we can access other EPM Cloud-based applications dashboards. In this particular case, we're looking at a income dashboard from Consolidation Cloud that has differing bits of content, where the actual first row speaks to the income statement tile. We're actually compiling different KPIs for sales through net income. The next actual grid within this dashboard includes a product mix view for different product offerings from a valuation perspective. Then we also have a bar chart that does a comparative between actual and planned on the right. So again, we have the ability to be able to launch differing options from a dashboarding perspective that are true to Task Manager, or as well as being able to access specific tasks that are defined within Task Manager to run dashboards and the corresponding connected applications. Now, the next is no more than our compliance overview dashboard, which is probably the most highly regarded, in that it gives us visibility into the actual status of performance. And that in this particular view, we see that we have a number of users who are charged with performing certain actions throughout the actual month of January 2017 on the January 2017 close schedule. In this particular view, we'll see that the actual users, again, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, some have performed, some have underperformed, some haven't performed at all. And that in this particular case, we have users who don't have any other tasks that have been performed on time. Almost all of their tasks have been late. There haven't necessarily been any rejections, but we also have the ability, given our access to the compliance overview dashboard, we can actually, on a per user basis, go in and actually see what specific tasks they have or have not performed. Now we're talking about this particular client compliance dashboard. We've got different opportunities for how we can actually view the actual content. We can elect to view this by user or by corresponding organizational unit. We can even just determine that we might want to filter this based on preparation or approval of specific tasks, or we can elect to define the order, whether it be chronological or alphabetic order by username, or based on on-time performance, who's that late offender who's frequently late in completing their task, what have you. So we have different options for how we can actually fashion this dashboard from a compliance perspective to be able to see or track the status and the corresponding delivery of tasks that have been assigned to a user. From a reporting perspective, the application comes with a wide variety of reports that come out of the box. Now, the biggest reality is, or the biggest concern from a number of our clients is, am I limited to just the out-of-the-box reporting? The answer, quite simply, is no. The out-of-the-box reporting is quite sufficient in a number of cases, but in the off case, there's a need to create a custom report. Those custom reports can be created by leveraging SQL against the actual application to be able to create that customized viewable report. But as is the case in most of the cloud-based applications, the output format is fairly true to Consolidation Cloud in that we can deploy reports as Excel-based documents, HTML, or PDF documents. And again, as you're going through, we just simply elect to generate that specific report, define the schedule from our available schedules and our period, and the actual report itself generates based on our out-of-the-box functionality. In this particular report, the compliance analysis report is a direct callback to the compliance dashboard that we saw, in that we can take that dashboard view to be a more formulated report view that if we need to store this on a monthly basis for confirming our monthly close task completion or some SOX requirement that we might have to produce a report for this to include in a book or package, we can export this as a PDF file for storage in that repository. We're also within our schedules opportunity to have the ability to be able to create report binders. And again, a report binder is no more than a collection of activities for a specific schedule or a collection of schedules, in that we can actually create a report binder to confirm or to visualize all of the tasks within a single schedule across the actual statuses, the completion, or what have you for all of our users. We can also elect on an optional basis to include any alerts that might have been created that would have impacted the schedule, any commentary that the actual workflow users would have assigned to a task, and even if there's an off chance that one of the workflow users elected to include an attachment, we can actually see those within the actual report binder as well. As you're going through the actual wizard, actually walks us through the actual success criteria for running that binder. Again, once you run this binder, it creates this binder in a zip fashion. And again, that zip fashion creates a collection of content based on the number of schedules that we elect to include in that report binder. And this is no more than an example of a report binder for a specific schedule, in that we can actually see the corresponding status of each of the tasks, if there are any alerts associated, and each of the corresponding tasks that are included in that schedule. We're going to actually actively see the status, the assignee, start date, or what have you. So this at its utmost level gives us on a pure formulary basis a complete view of the world for each of the schedules, so that if anyone wants to have a complete view of what we've done, what hasn't been done, we can actually generate a specific report binder to see that level of content for a specific schedule or collection of schedules necessary. We've also in the application got the ability to be able to create notifications. Now, this is probably one of the more powerful areas in the actual task manager functionality, in that as you're going through, there are three specific types of notification circumstances that we can define a frequency of notification. The first being a late notification, in that if I am a user and I'm late in completing a task, I can define the frequency of communication via email that those particular communications will come across. I also have a definition for a status change, in that if the status changes on a task, meaning it goes from open with preparer to being at the approver's level for approval, then I can define the frequency of submission of communication to that approver based on the status change. And then lastly, if there is a change or the due date delivery is changed, we can actually define email notification based on that change in due date for a specific task as well. And then lastly, and this is a grand win for a number of users who've asked, can I actually leverage SmartView with Task Manager? The answer is absolutely yes. There is a add-in for my Oracle SmartView for Task Manager, in that within the actual tool itself, we can go into the system settings to define what specific columns or fields that'll be visible or viewable within SmartView. Once we make that determination what specific fields we want to have visible in SmartView, I can actually take this view of a schedule from via the web and see the exact same content in SmartView, in that I have a listing based on the schedule, and again, this is based on my access, and again, based on the user's access, I can elect to submit a task, approve a task, reject a task, or if I'm part of a team, I can claim a task or release that task back to the team via Oracle SmartView. So again, any activity theoretically that I can perform in the web, I can also perform those actual actions in Oracle SmartView. And again, as I work through submission activities within SmartView, I can also realize the actual status change that I've committed in SmartView via the web as well. So what exactly did we say in today's webcast? Can I really transition from Excel to using Task Manager? Absolutely yes. Is this a heavy lift? Absolutely no. The little reality is that the little transition from an Excel-based closed or task managed solution to Task Manager is all based on the level of complexity and the volume of tasks. Now, how do we do that? As far as quick steps to transition to Task Manager from an implementation perspective, one of the most important things is to obtain connectivity details for those applications or those tools, be it ERP or EPM, that Task Manager is to integrate with. I want to make sure we also confirm who our user community is from an access control perspective, as well as being able to assign those corresponding users to tasks. We also want to make certain that the user community is actually aware of the tasks that are assigned to a corresponding user. We also want to make certain that protracted list of tasks is true to what is necessary within the application. Point being, there's probably no necessity to have a task management schedule that has 2,500 tasks. That becomes debilitating. You probably want to be very measured in defining the actual task content to make sure that's true with the ability to manage from a use case perspective the actual application. And also what's very important as far as addressing bottlenecks or having a really good idea of if we have an opportunity to compress, close timelines, what have you, is to have a really accurate or a reasonable expectation as far as defining what the start-finish durations are for tasks. That goes a long way towards determining if we truly have an opportunity to be able to compress the timeline for tracking our close. Now, from an interRel perspective, as far as our continuing education opportunities, there are a number. But the first I'll speak to is our Play It Forward program. This is no more than a series of videos that we have developed that expand upon different lessons learned on a product basis for a litany of products. Also includes some new features for Oracle Analytics Cloud, as well as other applications, be it on-prem or cloud-based initiatives that differing resources at interRel have produced. For those who've yet to access our Play It Forward campaign, this can be accessed at epm.bi videos. So again, to see that full listing of videos that we produce for learning opportunities. As far as our books division, we are world-renowned for the number of books that we produce from an Oracle Hyperion basis for OAC, PBCS, EPRCS, as well as differing on-prem applications. So again, for those who are unaware, which I hope you are aware, we are one of the foremost thought leaders as far as our book division for EPM applications. And next we'll speak to our upcoming webcast, in that again we speak to this being part of our Consolidation series. The next few webcasts that we'll speak to will be a webcast relative to the Reconciliation Cloud and the ability to be able to manage transactional matching. Then we're really excited on the 3rd of April to have a webcast led by Oracle's product developers with what's new in closing consolidations. And then last, we'll wrap up with a customer success story for an FCCS implementation. And as I wrap up, we want to make certain that those of you who are unaware, the upcoming Kscope 19 conference is coming up on June 23rd to 27th. For those who have not registered, we'd be really excited if you elected to leverage interRel's code of RC19 for receiving a $100 discount on your Caseload 19 registration. With that, I am Terrence Walker, a proud consultant with interRel Consulting Partners. Really excited to have led today's webcast. I can manage my closed tasks in FCCS without using FCCS for consolidations. Thank you very much for attending today's webcast. Have a great day.